Hello and welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I am chatting with the lovely Alyssa, and she takes us through her very different 3 pregnancies and birth stories. The journey into motherhood started for Alyssa with a very long conception. It took them a while to be able to conceive their daughter, only because Alyssa didn't know that she had an undiagnosed thyroid condition. So once this was treated and under control, Alyssa was able to conceive. She then decided to birth through the public hospital system and had a very medicalized pregnancy with a lot of extra scans, a lot of watching her pregnancy because she wasn't low risk, but she wasn't high risk either. And despite her first birth being an induction, Alyssa said she had quite a positive experience and felt good afterwards. But this still shaped the way that she wanted to birth. And from this experience, she learned to trust her body and decided that the second time around, things would look different. So when she fell pregnant again, Alyssa decided to have a home birth. And this time around, she said her experience was totally different. She hired a private midwife and her pregnancy wasn't as medicalized. It was more like, as Alyssa describes it, chilling out with a midwife, having a cuppa, and just chatting about everything baby and pregnancy. And after having a beautiful home birth, Alyssa said that she was done having babies, she was happy with 2, and that was it. But life had other plans for her, and Alyssa unexpectedly fell pregnant before her second baby's first birthday. In as much as a shock as it was, Alyssa knew that she wanted another home birth for this third little one. She contacted the same private midwife and had her again. And finally, Alyssa reflects on all 3 of her pregnancies and postpartum journeys, and she takes us through what she learned throughout her 3 different postpartums and how different she did things with her third one compared to her first baby. And the best advice that she has given in this episode is to tune out the noise and just do things the way that you want to do it. And on this note, I will leave you to listen to Alyssa's episode, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. You are listening to Cuppa with a Doula. I'm your host, Alicia, exercise physiologist and doula. And every week I chat with a mom or mum-to-be about all things pregnancy, birth, and parenting. The stories you will hear in this podcast are real and sometimes raw, but they are all told without any taboo. So grab yourself a cuppa, put your earphones in, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, do you want to start by introducing yourself to the listeners? So, saying your name, where you're living, and who is in your family.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alyssa. I am a wife, a mum of 3. So I have a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So my eldest just turned 9.
Wow.
And we got a puppy a year ago because we were done having babies, and I wasn't ready to accept that, I guess. So got a puppy who has also not long turned 1. Adds to the chaos. I'm a birth doula, a childbirth educator, volunteer with our local community advocacy group called Better Births Illawarra. Mm-hmm. We work with the community and with the hospital, I want to say, to try to improve maternity services for the Illawarra space. So, yeah, I live in New South Wales on Dharawal country.
Wow, amazing. That's a busy life, isn't it? Do you have free time?
Yeah, I am the sort of person that I feel like I'm only just coming out of postpartum brain fog. So starting to pick up books again, which is so lovely. But really my downtime is TV. That's what I do when I switch off. I just binge watch TV shows. And yeah.
Amazing. And so you've got three beautiful
I feel like as a
children.
doula, you have to practice what you preach.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
that's right. And you need downtime anyway. But yeah, so you're a mum to three. Did you
100%.
always want to be a mum?
Yes. Yeah. It's one of those things that
Mm.
I remember as a kid growing up playing with dolls and role play and all
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I think it was something that I always just knew I wanted.
Nice. So when you met your guessing husband, was he also on the same page? Did you have the conversation before you conceived your oldest one?
Yeah, we had been married for a good couple of years before we decided that we were ready. Originally, I think I said 2 and he said 4. He's from 4 and I'm from 2. So I think we
Okay.
just immediately went with what we knew. 4 seemed too many for me.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, after I had my daughter, I remember just saying like pretty early on, maybe in that first month or two, I don't know if I can do any more. Like I just love
Okay.
her so much and just want to
Mm.
spend all my time with her. I don't actually know if I can comprehend adding to this. And then we basically just decided from there that we just take a one baby at a time.
Mm.
Yeah, and landed on 3.
That's a good number. I mean, between 2 and 4, well, you've got 3, right? Is that why you had the 5
Yeah.
years age gap between your first and your second?
So it ended up being, I think she was 3 and 3 months or something when baby number 2 arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So it took us 18 months to fall pregnant with our first. I have a thyroid condition, so we didn't know why it was taking us so long to fall pregnant, but my GP found that. We got it medicated and we fell pregnant really quickly. So 18 months for the first, 6 months for the second, and the third chose his own timing, and we hadn't even started the conversation about when to have a third, and he just arrived, which
nice.
suits his personality to a T. Yeah, he's the boss. So she had toilet trained herself at around 18 months. She was super independent, loved picking her own clothes, just typical first daughter, liked to do things on her own terms. So that 3-year gap worked out perfectly in that situation, yeah.
Oh, amazing. Wow. So when you conceived your daughter, did you know much about, pregnancy, changes that were going to happen, about, model of care? Did you know anything about that?
I knew a fair bit. I had a bunch of people around me have babies. My cousin had twins, and I'd spent a lot of time hanging out with them and helping her. And so there was quite a bit that I was aware of. My dad, a few years before we fell pregnant, had a blood clot in his lung, and they didn't know why. He didn't fit any of the risk factors. And so in their, trying to diagnose him and find out what was going on, they found out he had a blood clotting disorder. And so my prenatal care, I also got investigated for that because it does come with some side effects and stuff that can affect babies. So I was high risk for a while. I did GP shared care until people found out about this condition, and then I was moved to high risk model of care. And no one really knew whether I was high risk or not. So there was a lot of debating. People didn't really know which model of care I fell in. There was a lot of back and forth.
They didn't know if you had the condition?
Sat with me and he was like, more high risk than... Well, I only had one gene. I didn't have the 2. And you need the 2 in order to be... for it to be in its full effect, I guess. And hematologist was like, nah, you're no more high risk than any other pregnant lady in terms of clotting and miscarriage and those sorts of things. So I would have been late second trimester, maybe even third trimester by that point. And I was like, I'm not changing models of care again. This is absurd. And I'd managed to see the same midwife. Normally in a high risk clinic here, you see the doctors. And I had seen the same midwife for quite a few appointments. So I just said to her, I don't want to move again. I'm not.
That makes sense.
So she actually saw me for the rest of my pregnancy at the hospital, which was much appreciated.
And continuity of care is everything, and we know that. And somehow you got it, which is amazing. And you got it through a midwife, which is better than getting it through a doctor who may pop in and out during your labor, really, but not be really present as such.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That is really good, actually. So did you have extra appointments because of your high risk label?
Yeah, they were quite frequent. And then I had a late term ultrasound I don't remember what week it was. Probably down here it's pretty standard to have one at 34, 35, 36. So somewhere around there. And they saw that my cervix was starting to shorten. Okay. And I remember being in the ultrasound clinic, and she took a really long time. The sonographer took a really long time and then said, I just need to go talk to my colleagues. I'll be back. And I just looked at my husband and I said, we're going to the hospital. It's not, they're going to come back and say that they've found something and we're going to have to go to the hospital. And yeah, they did. They came back and they're like, your cervix is starting to shorten. It shouldn't be doing that yet. We're really concerned. We've already called the hospital. They're expecting you. I was like, I didn't even get to go home and get more comfy clothes or, you'd like to be a little bit more prepared. So we went up to the hospital, did all their assessments and stuff, and went back home, and it was just more a bit of you need to be more careful, and if anything happens you need to let us know. I was a swim teacher at the time, which was great because it was a winter baby, but I was hot. I felt nice and light in the pool, so it was really quite the dream job. But there was a couple of kids that were a little bit more high needs than others, and so some of them would lash out or kick my tummy or something, so it just meant the logistics at work had to be a topic of conversation and trying to keep Bub and I safe for as long as possible. But continued on for the next couple of weeks. And I remember getting out of the pool one day at work and standing in the foyer chatting to the girls at the desk, and I felt this pop and trickle. I was like, oh, that's weird. And went home, called the hospital, and they're like, oh, pop a pad on, call us back in an hour. And nothing happened. So they were like, oh, it's probably nothing. There was probably just water trapped inside, and, it's not nothing to be concerned about. Had a follow-up ultrasound for the cervix stuff, and I had low fluid and a small baby. So now in hindsight, knowing what I know, I'm pretty confident that my waters had a leak or something had happened because my fluid had been fine. But low fluid, small baby. So next appointment went in, and the midwife that I was with was like, these two things, it's time, we need to get this baby out. So that was a Friday appointment. She was like, come in on Sunday and we'll get the induction started. Yeah.
Had you noticed, because sometimes when your waters leak and therefore you lose some fluid, had you noticed your belly shrinking or going a little bit smaller?
No, I've got a really long torso, so it was quite a snug pregnancy that first time around when all that connective tissue is still at its best. So I hadn't noticed any changes at all.
And so then they wanted to induce you. How far along were you then? Were you around 37 weeks then?
I was induced right on 39 weeks.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, at least that removes risks of prematurity and NICU stay and so on. So
and all my babies ended up coming in the 39th week.
It's got to be a sign, right? Maybe you set the tone from the go. The first
I reckon she would have come on her own that week anyway.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So did you know about induction back when?
And that's really common in our family. Not to the extent that I probably should have. It was very much glazed over, I would say, in the appointments. She was the midwife was good. She did explain why they wanted to do it, what the risk factors were, and it was definitely a conversation, not a you need to come in and do this and that's final.
That's good.
But now I would be like, well, there's a lot of risks. What if we wait 24, 48 hours, that sort of stuff. So I had the weekend to wrap my head around it. And I think it was the right call at the time for what we knew. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, it's obviously when you've got the insight now that you have, well, you think maybe I could have made things could have been different. But at the time, with the information you had, with how you felt, maybe you felt like, well, actually, yes, I feel like my baby needs to come out too, and therefore that's the right decision for you at the time.
100%. And she was only 3.1 kilos or something. She was little. She was 6-pounder, and she was in 5 knots for a long time, whereas both my boys were over 4 kilos. So for the babies that I have, she was small. And so that's another thing that sits with me where I'm like, it was absolutely the right call.
Yeah, I see. So you go in on the Sunday for your induction. How does that process go?
We took our bags and everything in. We got in there and there was a super lovely doctor on shift who, explained the process. They were going to do a Foley's catheter, went through what that was like, stay in the night, and said, before we do that, let's just give you an exam and see where you're at. Maybe we can skip this step. And I was like, oh, first time mum, not likely, but let's just give it a go. Yeah. So he did an examination and he was like, you don't need it. He's like, I can offer you a stretch and sweep. Again, asked consent. And I said, yep, that sounds good. And he said, okay, well, let's do this. And then you guys go home, have a good night's sleep and come back in the morning. So we did that. There was a bit of blood, which my husband wasn't expecting. And I was like, no, it's all good. They'll clean it. Like, don't worry about it. We got all cleaned up, went home for the night. And that doctor had actually said to me, when you come back tomorrow, when they rupture your membranes, ask for at least an hour or two before they hang the drip. See what happens with your body. You might not even need that next step. And I didn't know at the time that was an option. I just thought when you got an induction, you got it all. And so him saying that, I was like, oh, okay, we can just slow this process down a bit. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. And so when we went in the next morning, I said to the midwife caring for me, oh, this is what the doctor said last night. And she was like, yep, sounds like a good plan. Let's do that. And she was a midwife and a nurse. And so she also worked in ED sometimes. So her doing my cannula, sweet as, so straightforward. Yep. But when she went to break my waters, it was not as straightforward. Oh. I think my cervix must have still been a bit posterior or something because it took a long time. And so by the time she'd managed that, my contractions were 5 minutes apart and had a bit of spice to them. So, which was good. The induction was doing what it needed to, and I didn't need the drip, but it was just like that thing of hurry up, I want to get off the bed. I'm just like laying in this warm fluid and these have some spice. So got up as soon as I could and heat packs and all that sort of stuff.
Wow, that sounds epic, like the midwife just trying to find your waters to then break them and you're having regular contractions. It's like, okay. Wow. And so then were you left alone to, labour on your own and do what you wanted? You didn't have a CTG on, did you?
We had it on for a little while, but it didn't stay on because I remember walking around the entire room and being able to move in different positions and stuff. So I definitely wasn't attached to it. I had my husband and my cousin with me. And so they read my birth affirmations. They did heat packs. In a bunch of the photos, we're all laughing and smiling. Like it's a really good birth. And I think sometimes with inductions, we hear the cascade of interventions and when they're not those joyful experiences, but my induction was a really good birth. And so I really like those photos where we're smiling and laughing. And like it got serious. There's a photo of me laying on the hospital floor cuddling my husband's leg and he's sitting in an armchair. And I remember at that point saying, I'm going to need an epidural. Like what an idiot to think that I could do this without an epidural. This is insane. I'm only a couple of hours in and it hurts a lot, and I'm a first time mum. I've got a good 12 plus hours to go. I'm not going to be able to do it. And the midwife came back in and she was like, so should I run the bath? Because I had requested a room with a bath in hopes that I got a water birth. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's try the bath. Like, I really don't think it's going to cut it, but I'll give it a go. She ran the bath and we got in and she was like, so are you going to have your baby here? Like, are you having your baby in the bath? And I just remember thinking, why are we talking about this now? Like, there's so long to go. She was like, you're going to have a baby soon. Like, if you want to have your baby here, make the call now because you're going to have a baby really soon. And it was that thing of, am I, like, really? Like, it's only been a couple of hours. But what do you know? She was right.
There you go. So she kind of knew what she was talking about. That is so interesting. It is so, as you said, it's really good to hear about a positive induction story because it is an induction for, any reasons. I think we associate it with negative. Straight away, induction is not good. It shouldn't happen. And, there is all of those intervention that, are basically waiting for us. But that's not always the case. And that is so good in your case. The health professional in that hospital, they sound so supportive of, yes, we have to follow an induction protocol, but then also letting your body have a response to the induction, not just going, okay, we put the catheter in and then we break your waters and then straight away we do the augmentation and then we basically don't even give time to your body to understand what's happening. It just sounds so good. Like they were just giving you the power and going, okay, well, we've got to do this, but then we'll see how you respond to it. You're responding, your body is going into labor. Well, we don't need to do anything else then. We can just sit back and wait.
That's right. And I think like it's not always like that, particularly at local hospitals. And I guess that's the thing with the public system. It is a bit of a gamble who you're going to get on the day or night.
Yeah.
The staff that I had were so supportive. They knew it wasn't the ideal scenario for what I'd had, but they absolutely worked with us to make it a really nice birth. I remember I'd read Juju Sundin Birth Skills.
Yeah.
So I was stomping through the early stages and my midwife walked in and she was like, oh, we've got another stomper. I don't know what's with these women lately, but they're all coming in and stomping. And so my contraction ended and I laughed and I was like, oh, it's a really great book. You should read it. She was like, book? What are you talking about? And I was like, oh, it's from a book. Like, that's why we're all doing it. We're all reading this book and, you know, that's our coping techniques. So she laughed and she's like, oh, I'll have to go tell the staff that's why all these strange ladies are in here stomping away. It works.
Oh, that is so funny. And it must be so interesting for the midwives because, you know, as you said, you know, a lot of women have read that book, Juju Sondin's Birth Skills, and now a lot of women also doing hypnobirthing courses or, you know, reading books. So we're all coming in with similar, you know, coping mechanisms. And I'm sure when it first started, the midwives were probably like, okay, this is interesting. And then they see, you know, a few women in a row doing the same, you know, coping mechanism. And they would have been like,
yeah,
okay, did we miss something, you know? Did we not get the memo?
Is that's this month's one? Yeah, it would have been interesting to see the change as people have more access to information.
Exactly.
You know, what they're coming in with in their bags and their training and their coping. Yeah.
I got a midwife on and she was saying when she trained, they mentioned, you know, TENS machine as a coping mechanism, but that was like years ago. And she didn't really see any woman using TENS machine back when she started. And then in the last 5 years, everyone comes in with a TENS machine now. And she's like, it's been around, like it's not new. It's been around for a long time. I didn't see it really early on in my career. And then now I'm seeing it like every second woman, basically. No. So interesting, right?
They're everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually, the space that I use to teach my childbirth education classes, I actually went in on the lease with Ariel, the owner of Bliss Birth, which is one of Australia's leading TENS machine companies. So she's local to the Illawarra. Yep. And so she used a TENS machine for one of her births and was like, this is amazing. Why don't people have more access to this? And just started with this really small number of TENS and was like, no, this will be enough, a little bit of a side hustle. And now, they are booming. Like they're so busy. Again, more access to information. You see other people using it. And one of the really great coping techniques that we have access to.
Exactly. So back to your labor. So you're in the water. Is that helping you? The heat, the warmth, the sensation of the water? And did you have your baby in the pool?
Yeah, so at the time in that hospital, it was like a domestic-sized bath, so there wasn't a lot of space, and I'm quite tall. So I was in the bath like you would be in a bath at home, and I'd been pushing for just over an hour, and the midwife said to me, it's hospital policy that once you've been pushing in here for an hour, we should get you out, but you're making good progress, so keep going, keep doing what you're doing, it's going to be fine. And I remember being like, there's a baby's head right there. Like even if you wanted me to get out, I don't know if I could. Like, I don't know how that would work. But I remember just being so frustrated at the fact that I was in this position and there just didn't really seem to be progress, which, that's awesome. You want that slow thing and the slow stretch for all that to change. But it had been an hour and I was over it. So I felt the contraction build and instinct took over. I got up on my knees and went sideways in the bath and faced the back wall. And the midwife, I know that they panicked a bit because they couldn't see baby or me very well, but she came out in that contraction. So her head had been born a little bit before, and then I got up on my knees and she came out. And that instinct, right, if we trust women to get in a position that their body wants to put them in, birth is going to work. And so picked her up, got her out of the water, picked her up onto my chest. She was so covered in vernix. She was so sticky. Laid back in the bath. And the one thing that I don't like about that birth is no one had a conversation with me about the syntocinon injection or the oxytocin injection post-birth to birth the placenta. And so the midwives just said, sharp sting in your leg, gave me a needle, and I was like, what? What just happened? But I had those really bad calf cramps through my pregnancy, and it happened in labour. So my calves were almost square from these hectic contractions and cramps that I was getting. And so she said to me, I'm going to give you this injection and we're going to stand you up. As soon as you stand up, I promise those cramps are going to go. And I was like, they're not. Like, I don't think you understand how intense they are. They're not going to go away. I don't know how to get out of the bath. Anyway, they helped me and baby up, and they did. They went away and smashed Powerade and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think not being talked to about that injection and then it just happening and quickly moving on to the other thing of dealing with the cramps in my calves, it was sort of just glazed over. And then come baby number 2, I was like, oh, what happened with that? What was that scenario, and what other options do I have? So, you know, it was an induction. It probably needed to happen. We'd already interrupted physiology. It's fine. But yeah, that's probably the one thing with my birth where I'm like, I wish I'd had more of a conversation around that.
Yeah, and also, how can you give informed consent if all you hear is, oh, sharp sting, there you go, you've had the needle? That's not informed consent. You don't even know what you're receiving, and you don't even know what it's for. And it is still happening. You know, I mean, your birth wasn't actually that long ago, but it is still happening these days to just go, oh, well, the woman's... there's this assumption that after you've been in labor and you've given birth, somehow you're exhausted. True. But you can't make a decision now, so we'll just make the decision for you. We'll just put, you know, the needle in your leg. No. That is not how it works, you know. Like, you've still got brain capacity. You can still listen and you can say yes or no, you know, and or say, 100%. What is this needle you want to put in my leg? Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of continuity of care, right? You can have a lot of those discussions prenatally, and then women can make a preference. And I often say to the women I work with, you can say that you want a physiological third stage where you don't want that injection or the cord traction or the fundal massage. And then if something changes in the moment and you're having a big bleed, then maybe it's medically necessary and that conversation can evolve. But you get to make the preference.
Yep. That is totally right. That's why, you know, it's not about writing a birth plan, even though it kind of is a plan, but it sounds like a plan is set in stone and it's not ever changing. It's more preferences that you make that will then, they are ever evolving because birth is unpredictable, so is labor. And so therefore you're informed. That's the main thing about those birth preferences is you're informed, you know what the syntocinon injection is, you know what it does, you know the potential risks of it, you know the benefits of it, and therefore you've decided, you know, you've had a long time to decide in your pregnancy whether that is something you want or not. When there is a medical emergency or there is a medical, you know, there might, as you said, a bleed, medical management needed, that's another story there. Yeah. That's different. But, you know, you can go off a scenario where things are, you know, perfectly fine, baby's healthy, mum's healthy. What would you do then?
I think as well, like just being able to hold the space and go, can we just have 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Like, what does this family need in the moment?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then that conversation just needs to evolve. Hey, because some women don't want a physiological third stage. Some women want that injection and they want to just get that over and done with. Yeah. I've worked with women who've gone in with a plan to have a physiological third stage, and then 15 minutes later the placenta's not out and they're like, I'm done. Like, can we wrap this up? I just want to absorb my baby. You're like, well, it's your call. Yeah. Like, you get to change your mind. If you want to change your mind, you do that.
Exactly. You took 6 months to conceive your first boy. How was that conversation like? Did you feel in yourself, you know, ready to have a second one? And we know we don't share the love, it exponentially increases. But I think until you've got your second, you kind of don't really know that, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So we came to a point where we're like, oh, actually we could do this. Like, we'd been overseas for a friend's wedding and then we'd had a week in Fiji, and I was like, oh, she's at a really fun age now where I think we could manage. She'd started preschool and life was different. Yep. We didn't have that intensity of a newborn. And so, yeah, we had that discussion and similar sort of thing. It did take a while, but 6 months seemed like nothing when you'd already been through 18 months or so. And I don't have HG with my pregnancies, but I'm sick the entire time. And exhaustion is often my trigger for morning sickness. Wow. So there's all the food aversions that you go through as well, but the exhaustion as well. So my daughter got really good at, at running and getting my bucket, and so I could throw up, and she was just so good about it, very patient and understanding. Particularly, you've still got to cook dinners for toddlers and they still want snacks, and it's different with your first pregnancy. If you feel like crap, you tuck yourself up in bed and just hide, but 4:30 comes if you're feeling rubbish, suck it up. Like you've still got to manage stuff. So I was very well positioned in that I had family around and that sort of stuff. So we did get some support. But I remember going to work and being like, I can't vomit in a pool. Like what do I do here? So by the time the second pregnancy comes around, you're more prepared and you know what the symptoms are, pull over the car early and you just manage. But it was a good age where she could get herself dressed, and I think it's different with different kids as well. If you've got a really super sufficient kid that enjoys being autonomous, those harder pregnancies are more manageable.
Yeah, it lightens your load, that more to the point, but it's still, as you said, even though you haven't got HG, it's still so hard to manage, like you just feeling sick and being sick and then having to juggle, well, how do I, how can I be sick at work? Do I need to pull over right now in the car? That is just, that's dreadful. Wow. The whole pregnancy.
Yeah, the whole time. It's delightful. So after my daughter, I studied to become a doula when she was around 1, maybe 18 months. And so by the time we were getting ready to have a second, I was occasionally doing doula work. And thankfully, the adrenaline of births didn't seem to trigger it. Actually seemed to keep my morning sickness at bay. So I could get through a birth pretty good. But then, of course, you're exhausted afterwards. So it would increase for a day or two post-birth. So I just stopped working probably 25, 26 weeks with that pregnancy and just did other things because I couldn't do the aftermath of birth work.
Yeah, it is a lot. And especially if you're paying for it physically for like up to 2 days, being pregnant's hard enough, having to deal with all the aftermath of, as you said, the exhaustion, the nausea coming back, the sickness, that's too much. And you've got a toddler at home. It's like,
it wasn't fair on her
really.
either.
No, that's right. So you had a positive, hospital induction birth. What model of care did you want for your second? Obviously, I'm guessing you're not choosing to have an induction again, unless obviously medically necessary. But did you want to have another hospital birth?
No, I really had my heart set on another water birth. And at the time at that hospital, there was that bath that I'd birthed my daughter in, and then what we called the hallway bath. So you had to, whichever room you were in, leave that room, go across the hallway, and there was like a little, it's almost like a closet with a bath in it. And so the chances of getting it again were pretty slim. And, I'd learned a lot more by that stage, so I knew continuity of care was important. I knew that I had precipitous births. My family had precipitous births. And so I thought, well, what if we get a private midwife and have a home birth? And I floated the idea with my husband. He was like, well, we had such a good experience. Like, why would we not just go back there? And so I explained my reasoning and he was on board. He was a little bit concerned at first. He'd never really met anybody that had had a home birth or private midwife. And so, those usual fears of, is it safe? What are the risks? Do they transfer? But once he met my midwife, or our midwife, and chatted to her, he was like, oh, this is fine. Like, they're so incredibly skilled. They know the red flags.
Yeah.
Very rarely are they transferring in an emergency situation. Like, they'll pick up on it beforehand. So, we saved our pennies and paid for that throughout the whole pregnancy and postpartum, and, had a beautiful home birth with a private midwife. It was bizarre through the pregnancy because the first pregnancy was high risk and I was at the hospital all the time, extra ultrasounds, all the blood tests, and then going to a low risk pregnancy with a private practicing midwife. She came over for one appointment and I was like, is this normal? Like, is this it? We just hang out and have a cup of tea and listen to baby, and like, I don't have to have all the ultrasounds. Is this what we do? She's like, yeah, this is low risk continuity. We're getting to know each other, and we check on the baby and we check on you. And because of the thyroid condition, I was seeing my GP fairly regularly to check on that, and everything was just cruisy. I had a pretty big asthma attack in his pregnancy. I had never had asthma in my life. My brother had, and so I knew what an asthma attack looked like, but I didn't know what it felt like. And so, I sat up through the night taking Ventolin every hour, and it got early morning and I was still struggling, and we lived in a unit underneath my parents, and they had a really good recliner and a warmer house. So I went up and sat in their space and was taking this Ventolin quite regularly. My dad's a registered nurse, and he came out in the morning. He was like, you have to go. Like, you can't, this is not normal and you look terrible. So we went into hospital and they took me straight through to resus and gave me all sorts of medications to make me breathe, and I was tachycardic, and it just wasn't a great situation. I probably shouldn't have waited so long, but thankfully the hospital came to and helped me, and I walked out fine. But I remember going into the asthma clinic the next week so that they could, assess me and give me a care plan. And she was like, this is dangerous. Like, I really want you to sit and consider how serious this is and you need to monitor it. So, that added a little bit of extra monitoring throughout the pregnancy. But, I had a good pharmacist that was all over it, midwife, asthma clinic, and a good GP. So I felt really cared for and safe throughout that pregnancy. And I didn't have another asthma attack. We got it under control, which was amazing.
Wow. Do you know what triggered your asthma? Because you never had it. And then all of a sudden you've got full-blown asthma attack.
Yeah, so my husband was playing soccer or football at the time, and we had been out watching his game, and his games were like middle of the day, quite warm, and we stayed and watched the game after, and the air got really cold. And I remember my chest starting to feel really painful, but I was like, oh, it's just cold air. That happens. I'll get home in the warmth and it'll be fine. But yeah, nope.
Wow.
It was not.
So do you now have asthma? Like, do you still, use medication and manage it?
Yeah, so it got better. And then this autumn, actually, I had an appointment with my GP and I was like, this is not good. Like, all the same things are coming back. So for this year, yeah, back on Ventolin regularly, preventer if I need it. So bizarre. The body is crazy.
Wow, that is insane, because you just developed asthma. I mean, it sounds like you had basically, potentially predisposition to it, family history, but you just developed asthma in your pregnancy out of nowhere. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And obviously your private midwife wasn't concerned about this new diagnosis in terms of you having a home birth.
No. And at first I was like, oh gosh, is this, because I know private midwives have these really strict rules around them. But yeah, she was like, no, it's a managed condition. My thyroid puts me in a different category anyway. It was just another thing we tacked on and it was managed well. So it was no big drama.
And so how was your daughter in regards to the birth of her little brother coming up? I'm guessing she was involved with the private midwife appointments, and you probably would have told her about, everything about birth and how the baby was going to come out and so on, right?
Yeah, definitely. She was at most of the appointments, which was lovely because they built a connection and she got to hear the baby's heartbeat and all those sorts of things that they can do, measure my tummy. And we watched a bunch of birth videos, but unfortunately all the ones I showed her had been highly edited and had music over the top, which is normally my advice now if I'm working with parents and they already have toddlers. I'm like, show them unedited videos because it meant that she didn't know the sounds. She didn't know that there was going to be some blood. And so I started making all these, earthy guttural sounds and she got scared. So that's something that I'm like, oh, I really should have. But, I showed her birth videos. I did the best at the time. So she knew all of that stuff. We didn't find out what we were having, like in terms of boy or girl. And so she was adamant it was going to be a baby sister. And I just kept saying to her the whole time, we don't know. It could be a boy or a girl. We don't get to choose. We're going to wait till their birthday and find out. And yeah, she was most annoyed that it was a baby brother.
Oh, no. You don't get to choose. That is
we don't get to choose.
Oh, that's a shame.
Because we lived in the unit underneath mum and dad, it did mean that, so I'd gone into labour early in the morning and so she was around having brekkie and stuff. We had a photographer friend come over and she's got kids, so she was like, yeah, cool, I'll get Millie some brekkie and take photos and we're all good. Ben, you go and help Alyssa. But once she started getting a little bit uneasy, she just took herself upstairs to my mum's and they did craft and drew and hung out, which was perfect. I think that makes a really big difference, having a support person for the kid. And same thing with the next baby, her and actually I think the toddler might have hung around, but she took herself upstairs again and came back down once the baby was out.
Oh, see, that is so good. Just the autonomy, right? The you can be there for the birth, for everything. You know, you can be there during the labor, you can be there for the birth, you can be there for parts of, you know, either. And just the autonomy she had to go, well, yeah, I'm pretty done. You know, I'm just going to go and play with Nana, you know. Cool.
This is scary.
So your labor began in the morning, around 39 weeks, you said. Did you know you were in labor?
Yeah, I woke up. Same thing, we'd had on and off stuff through the last couple of days, but my daughter had been really, really clingy and emotional the day before. I ended up like a 39-week tummy rocking my 3-year-old to sleep for her day sleep. And I remember thinking, nah, she knows something's about to change. We're going to have this baby really soon. And the next morning, you know, before the sun and the birds were even up, I started getting some niggles, went to the toilet, and my husband would not wake up. I tried, and in the end I was like, get up! Because he just, no matter what I was doing, he was out to it. Yeah, got him up and got everybody over, laboured outside on my deck. We lived kind of near the bush, like our backyard backed onto the bush in the mountain, and I was listening to all the birds wake up for the day. And, it was beautiful.
That sounds like a dream, just being almost in nature and hearing, you know, nature, and without it being a soundtrack on Spotify. It sounds just lovely, and seeing the sunrise. And, that is a dream birth there. Wow. Did you birth him in a pool as well, or just on the deck?
Yeah. So I was outside labouring on the deck, and they got the pool ready and told me it was ready, and I went in, and I remember being on the toilet and they're like, it's too hot, you can't get in. I was like, I need to get in. You need to fix it now. Like, if it's too hot, deal with it, because I need to get in that pool. And they were doing everything they could, bucketing hot water out, bucketing cold water in. And in the end, my midwife was like, all right, like, you can give it a go. Let me know. And I got in. It was like, it's still too hot. Like, this is burning my legs. When you stand in a bath and you're like, but I really want to get in. So it was a bit too hot. So we waited a little bit longer, and I got in, and I was at that point where I couldn't communicate. So I was like pointing at washers because I wanted a cold wash on my forehead. I wanted a cold wash on my neck. I just didn't want to see people. So laboured in a pool for a little bit longer, and he was born in a birth pool in our lounge room.
That's amazing. Wow. And so when you found out he was a boy, how did you feel? Probably, you know, oh yeah, it's a boy.
It just made sense. I was like, oh, of course you're a boy. Like,
oh, nice.
There was no, oh, really? It was, I think he had the cord around his neck. All three of my babies had cords around necks and body parts and things. So I brought the baby up and took the cord off their neck and just cuddled, and I said to Ben, go and get Millie. We'll look at the gender together. And so he did. So we've got this beautiful video of us finding out and being like, oh, it's a boy. And then her and being like, oh. Just sort of like, oh, cool. I'm going to go back upstairs now. She just was like, she was done. She didn't really want to hang around. But as I'm looking, I'm like, oh, happy birthday, Judah. And like, so as I was saying his name, saying happy birthday, everyone was like, oh, that's such a beautiful name. Like it just, we had his name picked, and the second midwife comes in the video. She arrived as I was holding him. She was like, oh, he's already here. Okay, cool. That's great. I'll be around to help clean up and all that stuff.
Oh, that's hilarious. It's like, oh, I've missed everything. Well, I guess I'm here to clean up then. That's all I can do.
Yeah. Do all the weighs and the checks and the So my daughter's birth was around 3.5 hours, maybe 4. And his was about an hour 45.
Oh, wow. And did it feel more intense than your induced labour or not?
Probably, but I think because it's quicker. So you're still going through the whole labour process, but just in a condensed time. So, and I think the default is I knew what worked with my first baby, so I was like, I'll just do that again. But it was a different labour. Stomping didn't work. I was doing squats and, I breathed him out as well as pushing because I I wasn't being coached to push. So I had more autonomy over that stage. And I remember actively reminding myself, don't push down, like work with your body. It was different.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say. They say every pregnancy and every labor is different, but sometimes you can use the same strategies because, either it helps you to stay, grounded, calm, relaxed, or, some people have, they consistently have posterior babies, which means, they need help to manage, that back pain and so on. But yeah, no, different pregnancy, different baby, different labor. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so from there on, so you've got a year between your boys, right?
Yeah, so I found out I was pregnant before we'd even had my son's first birthday.
Wow.
I remember feeling sick for a good couple of days on and off. And I was like, great, one of the kids is giving me something. Like, I just felt so sick. And it was like 11:30 at night or something. And I was like, I'll do a pregnancy test just to rule it out because I have a doctor's appointment the next day. And it was 2 very dark lines very quickly. And I just burst into tears.
Wow.
And I came out and I just stood in front of my husband showing him with tears streaming down my face. He was like, oh, wow. I was like, I know. And like as soon as I'd pulled Judah out of the water and up onto my chest, I looked at my husband and I was like, we're having another one. Like I knew as soon as my second was born, hadn't even birthed his placenta, but I knew, I was like, we're having another baby. Like I'm not done. He was like, let's finish this bit first before we move on. But then finding out I was pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I'm still breastfeeding him before he goes to bed at night. Yep. He's still a baby. How am I going to manage? And I knew what was coming. I knew as soon as I got to that 6 weeks pregnancy, the sickness would start. And it had already been around. I was like, if I'm already feeling nauseous, where am I at in my pregnancy? And so, it was a shock. Took us a bit to come around. Went to the doctors the next day and my midwife came out and I just said to her, are you busy in 8 or 9 months? She was like, what? Like, I know. So I booked her straight away.
Yes.
Which is nice because she's a really good friend and colleague now. So, having 2 babies close together, people often say that 6-week-ish postnatal appointment with your midwife is quite hard to say goodbye. And some people are like, just have another baby so I can see you again. We did have another baby and we saw her again. We had her for the second home birth. But, now we're friends and colleagues, which is really lovely.
Oh, that's amazing. So, you wanted a third baby, but maybe not so soon. And then you're pregnant. Wow. Okay. How did you navigate that with, as you said, so you know where you're going with the sickness, the feeling just off, and you're breastfeeding. How did you navigate that?
So we ended up getting to 14 months breastfeeding with my second baby, and he was just having one side, the feed before bed at night. So it was only one feed and it was a small feed. But he would unlatch and there was teeth marks, like teeth indents on my breast. And I was like, nah, man, I'm done. I'm trying so hard not to throw up on you while you breastfeed. You're digging your teeth in. That's it. I'm calling it. And the next night I just said, no, like we'll have something else. And he was fine, which is him to a T. He's like, oh, okay, whatever. Like that's what we're doing. And we'll just roll with it. He's 5, almost 6. So I can start to see that changing slightly in some of his behaviors. But most of the time he will just roll with things. And he did. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it.
Wow.
He was like, that's just what we're doing and that's fine. Which meant that I got me for a bit. Like I know I'm growing a human and I'm pregnant, but it just felt different. I didn't have someone on me. And I know a lot of my friends that have gone like back-to-back pregnancies and have breastfed and then tandem breastfed, they feel very touched out by the end of that journey. So I am grateful that I got that little bit of a gap between breastfeeding, because then my last probably would still be breastfeeding if he could. And he's 4. When we weaned, he was like, why, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And even it was a good 4, 5, 6 months later, I'd put on button-up PJs and he'd be like, milk? No, mate, like they're just my PJs. I just want to get cozy in some button-up warm PJs. And he'd be like, button-up PJs means breastfeed, like let's go. So with that my last, I breastfed, he was well over 2.
Oh.
Which was nice. It's my last baby, you know, you get up. I knew he was my last, and I didn't care how much I had to get up through the night and breastfeed. I breastfed him to sleep for every sleep. I didn't care what people said.
Yeah.
And so it was just a very different experience with the third.
That is just so cute. I love it. And so how did you prepare your toddler for the birth? So obviously your daughter kind of knew what birth was. She'd seen you in labor, but your toddler is 18 months-ish at the birth of his little brother.
Yeah, so I think he was 18, 19 months, so completely oblivious. He just thought the pool and the duck were great things to play with.
Yeah.
I woke up with this intense back pain, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like that back pain is either going to break my back or I'm going to throw up. It hurts so much.
Wow.
And so I went to the toilet and I was like, maybe I just need to poo. Like, what is going on here? This is, something's happening. And I thought, no, I'll have a nice hot shower. Messaged my midwife and I said, I don't feel right. I thought I'll have a nice hot shower and that will help that back pain.
Yep.
39 and something at this stage. And everyone else in the house was still asleep. Got in the shower, had a shower. By the time I got out, I was like, there's some tightenings happening. Like, messaged my midwife and my photographer. So she was coming again. So she was at both my home births. A friend of mine that is a beautiful photographer, and got Ben to message my cousin. So again, she was at all of my births. She was a student midwife by this point. And so messaged the midwife. She was like, I'll bring my stuff over. We'll drop it off and we'll assess what's happening. Like, I'll lay eyes on you and see. And everyone in the house had started waking up. The kids wanted brekkie. I think it was a preschool day, maybe, for my daughter. And so Ben's in the background trying to deal with all that. My midwife arrived and was like, there's no liner. Like, the liner hadn't arrived for the pool. And she looked at me and she was like, well, I'm clearly not leaving. Like, you're in labour. Let's quickly clean the pool and fill it up. And I went and sat on the toilet, and she came over to do a Doppler check, and she looked at me and she goes, are you pushing? And in my head, I remember being like, yes, of course, can't you see? But apparently all I said to her was yes, which I'm very grateful that I was much more polite on the outside. And so she just said to Ben, don't worry about the pool, get some towels. Like, there's not time. And so she told me to get off the toilet, and I ended up leaning over the toilet with towels underneath. And there's this photo of Ben standing, my midwife kneeling on the ground, and then my butt right there. And I remember having this moment of panic. Like, I can't do a land birth. I give birth in water. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to feel everything way more intense. I can't birth here. This is not what I wanted. And so I just regrouped and I was like, okay, all right, God, if this is where I'm having this baby, I'm going to need some peace right about now, because this is not my plan. And there's this beautiful photo that my photographer got. The baby was coming, like I was pushing, and I had my hand down, kind of giving some counter pressure and trying to slow that descent. And so I had essentially a hand around this bulging baby, and then it disappeared. And I said to my midwife, the baby's gone. And she was like, cool, let's get in the shower. And so I waddled out of my toilet and round to my bathroom and got in the shower. But in my head, I was like, where the hell did that baby go? Like, it was just there. And we think what happened is he was posterior, which is why I had such epic back pain. And he, being the third baby, had more space and had reshuffled himself. And so I had a bit of relief and waddled myself to the shower and got down on the shower floor, and he was back down there, and I gave birth in the shower. And there's a video on Instagram that every now and then will get a little bit more attention and go around and do the views and stuff again. But he comes out and he's again cord around the neck, but it's black. He's quite tangled in his cord. And my midwife is just standing at the shower door. You've got this. Are you okay? Like, loop it all around, and you're okay. And so I untangle him from his cord, and then I think I asked for a washer to wipe some of the blood and stuff off. But his birth was around 45-ish minutes once we were like, yeah, this is definitely labour. So like that, it's, yeah, it changes. So that was the first of my 3 births that my cousin hadn't actually seen the baby come out. She came and I was already holding him. Yeah, which was, super special that she got to eat all 3. So, yeah, sat in the shower for a little bit more with some hot water, birthed the placenta and stuff, and, yeah, snuggled on the lounge. Had some afterbirth pains. Those things suck.
They do. Was it the first time you had them? Because
that's when I knew we were done at 3. I had them a little bit after my second, but when they hit after my third, I looked at my husband and I was like, oh, no. Like, this is worse than labour. We're not doing another baby. If this is going to just keep getting worse with each baby, that's me done. Shut. So I remember I had this really beautiful second midwife. I'd ordered from Blissful Herbs that afterbirth tincture. Yeah. And it tastes foul, but works really well. So she was putting it in juice and I was just sculling it. She was heating up heat packs. Like, she took such good care of me. But, yeah, those aren't pleasant. Your poor uterus.
Right. Wow. That is epic. So where were your children when your second boy was born then? Were they with Nana and Grandpa?
I think my daughter was upstairs. I think the toddler went up for a bit, but he came back down because in the photos he's just playing in his room. Okay. He actually was very smart and used the opportunity to go and play with some of his sister's toys because she wasn't around. And then, yeah, he's in the background of all the photos just doing his own thing, chilling.
Oh, okay.
Playing with toys and playing with the pool and the duck and eating.
Yes, because the pool would have been semi-filled and not attended, so great place to play.
Well, it was inflated but empty. They hadn't even got a hose in it. It's just
there was no time for the hose to fill it up. I love it. Wow. That's epic. And I just love the way your midwife is like, yeah, it's happening now and it's happening here whether you want to birth on the toilet or not. You know, I mean, maybe getting off the toilet is the best option, really. But wow.
Yeah, you need to get off now, Alyssa.
The space that private midwives hold for women is amazing. You know, they just step back, watch, and, you know, in your case, you know, help you to determine that the toilet's not the best place to birth. But otherwise, they're super hands off, just watching it all unfold. And she didn't need to step in at any point. She knows that you know how to do it. Cool. I'll just be in the background. Amazing.
Yeah. And that trust, the trust of a mum's instincts kicking in that they're going to untangle their baby, but her being like, I'm around. Like, if you've got it, you've got it. Let's just do it. And I'm actually super grateful that my birth unfolded that way. Last year, I was working with a family, second baby, and mum had been doing horse's lips, so I didn't really know where she was in labour. But she went to the toilet before we were going to go up to the hospital, and just for a second she broke her horse's lips and I heard that deep guttural groan that women do when they're pushing. Okay. And I was like, oh, like, here we go. And she'd started pushing on the toilet. And so straight away I was like, all right, hop off the toilet, you're okay, let's get some towels, like, all good.
Wow.
And yeah, she had her baby right there on the floor in front of the toilet. And I just remember being like, look at that.
That looks familiar.
Just like that. We can have these flashbacks and, you know, the calm voice of a midwife in your head being like, okay, hop off, like, all good. And, yeah, she had a baby and a placenta right there on some beautiful white towels.
Oh, amazing. That is the best advice. And yeah, I can see how that would have resonated with you, and you would have been like, so this is probably what it looked like from my midwife's perspective. And she was like, yeah, there's no time for the pool, really. Like, you're going to be here.
No, this is happening.
Yeah, wow. And so I guess, well, we didn't touch on any of that, but let's talk about postpartum. With your third, I'm guessing through your postpartum periods, you probably would have learned different things and you would have taken away different messages. What's your best, you know, postpartum advice, I guess, for, you know, mums listening?
Tune out the noise. Again, because it was my third, I was like, oh, of course. Like, if you feed to sleep and that works, of course I'm going to do that. Like, why would I spend, with my second, I spent so long trying to get that baby to sleep and then put it down only for him to wake up. And then me end up frustrated at my 3-year-old daughter because she needs something, because of course she does, she's 3. And, you know, because everybody had this voice in my head being like, well, your baby needs to sleep in the cot, yada, yada. And so with my third, I would sit in their rooms and breastfeed him to sleep, and he slept with all the noise and the chaos. Or I'd sit in the lounge room and the other two would have their quiet time, or they'd be at school or preschool or whatever, and, you know, it just worked. And he turned 1 in the first 2020 lockdown. And so, you know, our postpartum looked a little bit different to every one of my others, because life looked different for all of us.
Yeah.
But I just remember being like, no, we're just going to roll with it. Like, if I want to feed him to sleep, he's not going to be doing that when he's 7, 8, 9, 10, 18. Eventually it will stop working for us, and then we find a new thing. I don't have to stress about that now. Right now we do what works and what's safe and what's best for us. And when that's no longer working, then we look at a new option. Yeah. And it's just so much easier to do it that way than to try to parent to other people's expectations.
Exactly. That makes so much sense, you know, and it's, society tells us what we should be doing when we know that every baby is different, and you can't force things onto a baby and make them fit this rigid schedule or, you know, rigid box when they're just not that type of baby. But yet we expect every baby to fit the same schedule, routine, and so on, when we should be really trying to understand what our baby, you know, what helps to settle them, what helps, what triggers them, what, you know, when do they seem to be, you know, a bit more sleepy, when is the best time to put them down, when is the best time for them to not be put down, you know, and just following their cues rather than trying to make a rigid schedule fit this newborn baby or this toddler, which wouldn't work and is so much more hard to do than following your toddler's cues and going, well, they're not tired, they can have a play, and then maybe they'll be tired in 20 minutes. Perfect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If we just take out the rules and look at our child, it's parenting is so much trial and error. And, you know, particularly going from 1 to 2, I found that transition the hardest. Going from 1 to 2, that was by far my hardest. 0 to 1, loved it. You know, I really waited a long time for that baby. 1 to 2 was hard because I listened to everybody else's judgment and expectations, and I had this ideal of what it was going to be like. I could put the baby to sleep and hang out with my 3-year-old and it was just going to work. It didn't work like that. And then I fell pregnant while he was still a baby, and, you know, so I had to release some of those expectations. So with my third, I was like, well, this is my last baby. There is no do-over. There isn't another chance to try a different postpartum after this. So I just need to block out all the outside noise and pay attention to what my baby needs and what I need. And what I need is rest. And if I'm going to get that by feeding my baby to sleep and having contact naps, then of course I'm going to do it that way.
Beautiful. That is amazing. And now, how are you finding your kids, you know, relationship is? Because Millie was maybe a little bit disappointed when she found out she had a brother as your second child. I'm sure now they've got the best bond ever, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're close, and I think I look at them and I'm like, do you know what? As adults, you're going to be fine, because there's the moments where they are planning things, you know, around the house where they'll be like, let's be spies, and, you know, working great teams, you know, to do things to Ben or I, or they'll play beautifully if they're playing Lego together. They're still siblings and they're still kids, so there's moments where it's all out war. And, you know, there's fists being thrown and words being thrown. But that to me is normal childhood, because they're kids expressing it. And so I'm like, no, it's not ideal. Like, don't love that you're all screaming, but you're figuring out your place in the family and you're figuring out your place in the world and what you stand for and not going to stand for. So we manage it. But I know that come late teen adulthood, when, you know, they're past that intensity, they're going to be just fine. They're going to be really good friends. We did make a deal with Millie that when we got a dog, it would be a girl, so she could have a sister. So that, we ended up having to get a female dog so that she could have her sister. long-awaited sister.
Right. Well, that's very cute. That is a really good way to provide Millie with a sister that doesn't involve you having another baby, which could potentially not be a girl anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm in awe of all your birth, really, because every single one of them has been really positive. You've been really calm and in your zone, really. And your last one being 45 minutes is, it's almost like a dream, but it would have been so intense. And you obviously, when you're in it, you don't know that it's going to be this quick. So it still, it still feels like I can't do it.
Yes.
It's too much, it's too soon, and all of those. That's amazing. And so now, you're raising 3 beautiful children and a puppy. That's a lot of work too.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what their birth stories mean if they go on to have kids. Like what is set for their future in terms of, will my daughter have home births? Because sometimes she'll say to me, well, why was I born in a hospital? I'm like, well,
true.
I didn't really know at the time, but also you were high risk for a bit. So it'd be interesting to see, what she chooses, if she chooses to have kids later, what she'll choose for care. And, the boys, when they find a partner and if they go to have kids, is it something that they're going to float to their partners? Like, hey, we've considered having a home birth. I think it's important for young men to have those conversations. And it's the same, it's the same stuff with periods and, all of that stuff as well. Like our boys will grow up knowing that that's just what happens. And, wouldn't be surprised if they're the sort of boys that carry pads in their bags just in case it happens to some of their friends because they've got that way of thinking already. So I'm excited for what it means for their future as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we know that home birth is, as a first-time mum, it's more common if you know someone in your close family that has had a home birth, like whether it's your mom or it's maybe your cousin or your auntie or someone close to you, and therefore they've paved the way to show you that, well, it's possible. It doesn't have to be, a painful, emergency type situation with people rushing in and machine that go beep beep and you're strapped to the bed. No, it can be quite relaxed. There can still be a level of pain and discomfort, and it's not easy, but it can be done in the house and have a calm and relaxed environment around. Definitely.
100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think we've covered it all, haven't we? And we've done it in such a timely manner. That is really good. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Look at us go.
So efficient this morning, are we?
Thanks for having me. I love sharing birth stories.
Yeah.
So efficient. I think it's so lovely to just give time and space for women to share their birth stories. It's so needed.
It is, and it helps. I mean, you've done it before, so it's not your first time, but when it is your first time, I think it helps you you reflect on it. So sometimes you can look back, even though your birth has happened, maybe it's not recent, but it can help you to give you this insight of, when I was talking about it, I just said this, and that's making me feel that way, or it helps you to reflect, I feel. And I think that's really cool. That is really good. Sometimes it can be also a form of debrief, depending on how the birth has unfolded, obviously. But
yes,
it is really good. Yeah, I love it. I love hearing birth stories. It is just, I'm here for it.
It's such a treat, hey. You just get all the oxytocin vibes. You really do go on the journey with women when they share their birth story.
Oh, I know, right? I mean, being in the birth room is obviously a whole new level of oxytocin, but hearing the story unfold and going...
Absolutely. Wow. The strength women have, hey.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for your time, and I hope you have a great day after sharing your birth stories. You can reminisce on them. And
thank you for having me.
No worries, my pleasure.
I've got some baking to do for some postpartum clients, so it'll be all oxytocin and loved up today while I bake, which will be super lovely.
Oh, that is so good. I love baking when, you're already in such a good mood. It's like, love this. I love this. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.